On today's adventure, I head for the bottom left corner of the state to visit the infamous and legendary Yuma Territorial Prison. Once home to some of the West's most violent criminals. Over the course of its operation, it saw over 3,000 inmates pass through its doors before later being abandoned. Now a state park, the prison is a fascinating place to visit and learn about the past. Hello and welcome to Yuma, Arizona. Today, join me for a day trip to one of Arizona's most unique state parks, Yuma Territorial Prison. While certainly nowhere close to being off the beaten path, it is a place I have surprisingly never been to before today. And since I was down here for work, figured I would make the most of the trip and visit the prison, as well as a few other stops on the way home. Let's get into it. Yuma Territorial sits on a small bluff overlooking the Colorado River. The year was 1875, and Yuma was a bustling boomtown. A gateway to the west for many California gold rushers, which I plan to talk about in another video in the near future, the county seat was established here just a few years earlier. The state legislature saw the need for a state prison to hold its criminals, and what better place than the middle of the desert? $25,000, nearly $700,000 in today's money, was budgeted for the project. Ground was broken the next year on April 28, 1876. Several prisoners were transported here and forced to build their own cells as part of the construction project. Talk about adding insult to injury. By July 1st of that same year, basic amenities were finished at the facility, and the first 7 prisoners moved into the newly constructed cells. As new prisoners were accepted, ongoing construction projects further developed the prison, adding on new cell blocks, support buildings, and prison yards as the need for larger facilities grew. Those housed at Yuma Territorial were admitted on a wide range of charges, ranging from murder to stagecoach robbery to polygamy, and almost everything else in between. And some of the most notable inmates included Bert Alvord, a Cochise County lawman turned train robber, Pearl Hart, the famous woman stagecoach robber, and buckskin Frank Leslie, to name just a few. New prisoners arriving at Yuma would typically arrive via wagon. The first stop was the Sally Port, an adobe gate with 2 iron doors, spread out enough to allow a wagon to park in between and offload prisoners. The term Sally Port originates from the Spanish phrase salir por la puerta, meaning to go out the door. After being admitted, prisoners would be given a number, have their height and weight measured as well as other vitals, have their head shaved, and be forced to take a picture using a specially designed mirror that is now on display inside the museum. From there, it was into their respective cell along the cell block. As the prison filled with inmates, up to 6 prisoners at a time would be held in a single cell. The cramped conditions made life hard. The extreme outdoor temperature meant in the summer months, 120 degrees Fahrenheit wasn't uncommon for inmates to have to deal with. Despite the rough conditions, many inmates referred to Yuma as the, quote, country club on the Colorado. A well-balanced diet, medical treatments offered on site, the opportunity to perform work, making linens and other items, in exchange for money at the end of their sentence, and other recreational opportunities made life seemingly less harsh. Inmates played games and could even perform in the prison band. In October 1887, the Sally Port entryway was the site of the prison's most famous escape attempt. Known as the Gates Riot, during which 7 prisoners attempted their escape, holding Superintendent Thomas Gates as a hostage. Gates was stabbed in the neck during the riot, but ordered the guard tower to shoot. 4 inmates were killed, another was wounded, and 2 escapees were later captured and given time in solitary confinement. Gates would survive the attack but quickly retire due to the ongoing pain he was in. For those particularly troublesome or rowdy inmates, there was the dark cell. Built partially into a hill, prisoners would be stripped down to their undergarments and locked inside to a cage. They would get one meal a day, bread and water, and there was no bed or restrooms inside. The only source of light was a small vent in the roof, and while the temperature was often more mild than the cell block, the brutal conditions meant that time spent inside the dark cell was especially harsh. Yuma operated for 33 years. A total of 3,069 prisoners passed through the doors while it was open. There were 138 total escape attempts, with most, but not all, inmates being either killed, wounded, or recaptured. And there were 42 successful escape attempts. 112 convicts died during their time at the Territorial Prison, 104 of which were buried on site in the local cemetery. Due to overcrowding, the state opted to build a new holding facility in Florence. That prison was built using convicts from Yuma, and in 1909, the last inmate was transferred out. After being abandoned, the prison was repurposed for a variety of uses. Yuma High School rented out several buildings from 1910 to 1914 after a portion of their school burnt down. And it was during this time that high schoolers affectionately adopted their team nickname, the Yuma Criminals. With the construction of the Southern Pacific Railroad in 1924, about a third of the prison was destroyed to make way for new tracks. During the era of the Great Depression in the 1920s and 30s, several families and vagrant travelers camped out in the defunct and rotting prison cells. After being looted and falling out of use, preservation efforts were eventually made by the city of Yuma. The Territorial Prison was eventually adopted into the state park system, where it was brought back to life. Today, it stands as a remarkable testament to prison life, telling the stories of those inmates that served time here, and showing off what life in Territorial Arizona was like if you were a criminal. Today, there is a lot to see and learn at the old prison. In addition to the original cell block and the dark cell, where you can easily get an understanding of what it would have been like to be incarcerated here, there is a fascinating museum. It goes through much of Yuma's history and has old pictures, models, and plenty of artifacts from back in the day. The guard tower outside provides an overview of the property and the surrounding Colorado River. Built atop the water supply, this would have been one of several guard stations used to monitor prisoners serving time down below. After a couple hours of walking the grounds, I headed into downtown Yuma. There's lots of great lunch options, but I headed for the appropriately themed Prison Hill Brewing Company. While the food here is great, I grabbed a quick can of beer for later in the day, since it was getting late and time for me to head back towards Phoenix. And of course, no drive to Yuma would quite be as much fun without one last stop in the middle of nowhere. Like a beacon in the desert, a stop in Dateland for a delectable date shake was the perfect way to round out a day trip to Yuma. Talk about a country club on the Colorado experience. But just wanted to wrap up the video here. It's been a good day exploring the prison in Yuma. course getting some prison beer and now some shakes, so it's a pretty good day. It's kind of a win in my book. Wanted to thank you for watching this video. I know this one's a little bit different, a little bit shorter, but I really want to start mixing in some different content, some shorter format content, you know, day trips, hikes, things like that, because as much as I love and will continue to do the long format trips and stuff, those just take so long to edit and so long to work on that I just can't do that all the time if I want to have consistent content or anything. So I'm going to be mixing in, you know, more trips like this, just kind of as I go around, and hope you enjoy that and continue to look forward to the big trips, the small trips, everything in between. That's just the beauty of exploring, is the wide range of things there are to see and the stories there are to tell. So anyways, from Dateland, signing off with my date shake. Gonna enjoy this on the way home. And after getting back home, I did get to enjoy that beer. All of the beer names are fun and creatively themed to the prison, and the Mistrial Pale Ale that I tried was no exception. Thanks again for joining me on this day trip. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And as always, we'll see you on the next one.